everybody, I'm Chef AJ and welcome to Healthy Living. My guest today is David Goldman. David is a registered dietitian who works at one of my favorite places in the world in Santa Rosa, True North Health, and he is a treasure trove of knowledge and information, and I'm so excited to talk to you today, David.
I'm excited to talk with you too.
Yeah, this is going to be fun because we're just buds. And you know what I love about you? You're like about 30 years younger than me, 25, 30 years younger than me. So I don't know if you remember Jack LaLanne, right?
I'm not 14. I'm not 14 yet.
Well, yeah, I'm going to be 57 in a few weeks. I think you're like 32, if I'm not mistaken.
33, yeah.
Yeah, so I could be your mom. But are you old enough to remember Jack LaLanne, David?
I do remember. I had actually had his juicer growing up.
Right. So one of the things he often said is that exercise is the king, and nutrition is the queen, and together they make the keys of the kingdom. Now, I might reverse it and say that nutrition is the king and exercise is the queen, but you are royalty when it comes to nutrition and exercise. And I got to tell you, I've known you for over a year, but I didn't know you. Like, meaning we met at True North a couple of years ago when you started working there. I thought you were very pleasant, nice, loved your wife, loved your family, but we didn't really interact much. And then what happened is this last time there, I had a session with Dr. Goldhammer, who's also my chiropractor, because I had two accidents in the past. I broke my back when I was 22, so that's like 35 years ago, and I broke my knee about 7 years ago. And they just started acting up. So I went to him for chiropractic care, and he gave me the adjustments and the things they do. He said, but what you really need to do is make an appointment with David Goldman. Now, when Dr. Goldhammer or Dr. Lyle or Dr. McDougall tells me to jump, I basically say, how high? And I made an appointment right away, which was actually very difficult to get because you're always booked. And it was so empowering and inspiring that immediately my husband made a session. Two of my friends booked a private session because what was happening is the physical therapists, they're very wonderful, but the exercises they were giving me to help my knee were hurting my back, and the ones for the back were hurting my knee. And you somehow were able to figure out a routine for me that I actually could do that would benefit both. So first of all, thank you for that. But how do you know so much about so much? Because there's a lot of wonderful plant-based dietitians, and there's a lot of wonderful plant-based trainers, but you're both.
I would give you a hug right now if I could, if you were not stay away.
Give me a high five.
Can I actually? Oh, well, high five too.
Right.
Can I also? Yeah. Can I out us?
Sure.
And say how we exchange services?
Oh my God! Be careful. We don't want my husband to know. We did do a trade.
We did a trade, right? You made the most delicious pecan pie. I think that was right around Thanksgiving, was it?
Yeah, it was a Christmas, and it only had 2 ingredients, dates and pecans. Yeah.
Man, it was so good. I would do that. We could trade that every day of the year.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to send you some cookies in the mail that you're going to love, and then we can do some more business. But can people see you, David, or do they? I mean, I know they can see you, but do they have to be a patient at True North, or like we're Skyping right now? Could somebody, do a private consult with you?
Yeah, I do that all the time. I do that. I work with patients in I would say four continents.
Wow.
Do exactly what you're saying. We use a secure version of Skype called DocSeeMe, and I work with patients all the time. For example, you might have your husband hold your iPhone up and film, shoot you doing squats and move around. If I say, hey, take a step to the left, he takes a step to the left, and I can see how that looks. And so I do that all the time. I do nutrition consults over the phone, and I do it through this DocSeeMe as well. And I'll answer your question. The way that I learned as much, and I honestly, I feel like I have a lot more to go, but the majority of what I learned was kind of in the field. So I did go to graduate school, and I did get graduate degrees in exercise sciences called applied physiology and nutrition, and I did get that credential, the registered dietitian thing. But I worked in strength and conditioning for Columbia University for about 5 years, and I learned so much about the way that the body is meant to move. My first job out of college, I worked as a personal trainer at Gold's Gym, and
wow.
It's interesting, but I learned so much more when I learned movement, the way that athletes are designed to move. And so I learned a whole lot there on the food front. And I also worked in obesity research, by the way. In obesity research, I also learned a lot about human physiology there. I worked there for about 4 or 5 years. And same thing with nutrition. I've been really blessed. I worked with really athletic folks. I currently work with pro football players and MMA fighters and a bunch of really high-level people. But then, like I said, in obesity research, it was very much the opposite end of the spectrum. And here at True North, it's somewhere in the middle, and working at Facebook headquarters also somewhere in the middle. And so I've been fortunate enough to work with tons of different populations, and that makes people like you, my friend, very, very easy, because I've seen better, I've seen worse, I've seen everything. So it's kind of where I've gotten my information.
Well, it sounds like you have a really fun job, and you're so inspiring when you lecture and when you do a private session, and you're very passionate about it, and you walk the talk. I remember, like, in the old days, you'd go to, well, you don't remember these old days, but doctors would smoke cigarettes, but everything you tell somebody to do, you're doing. You're not telling people to go on a whole food plant-based diet and exercise. I mean, you're telling them that probably, but you're actually doing it.
I try. I really do. I feel like if I don't practice what I preach, I wouldn't listen to me. I really wouldn't.
Right.
Every protocol. So I love intermittent fasting. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point. But I've played with every permutation of intermittent fasting that I've read about in the scientific literature, because I don't want to recommend that a patient do something like that without having personally experienced it. And actually, since I've been to True North, I've been playing around with different versions of this diet: a higher fat, a medium fat, a lower fat, a higher carb, playing with different ways of getting protein in, if it's more legumes or less or whatever it might be. And I think it's really fun to play with this and to see how does my body respond and how do I feel, because the science will give us fantastic insight into how to go about things in a kind of a population approach. But on an individual basis, these N of one, or studies of one person, and really that's the best way to go about it, is to have a really good direction from what the literature tells us, and then we experiment solo and see what happens. And you do this too, right? I mean, you've also created your own.
That's so funny that I always test everything on myself. Like, I used to be a respiratory therapist, and I insisted that they suction me and give me a blood gas, which, by the way, both are extremely painful when you're not, like, sedated, because I didn't want to do something to a patient that I didn't do to myself and just recommend it because the literature said it. I wanted to experience. So anything I recommend, and I don't take any kickbacks for products that I recommend, is because I use them and I love them and they work for me.
See, that's why I would only have open heart surgery from a cardiologist who's personally cut their own chest open. I totally get what you're saying. I think it makes sense, right? You want to be able to speak from experience. It's one thing to know things objectively, but to personally experience it, it means you can speak from that experience. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. Well, maybe, I hope at some point you're going to write a book, because you know so much about so much. I was thinking maybe an ebook, 101 ways to do intermittent fasting, because, we get so many questions about that. So, that's a cool place to start if you want, because, not everybody has to do intermittent fasting, right? I mean, nobody has to do fasting at all, really. But tell about the difference between what is IF, intermittent fasting, and what is water fasting that you do at True North, or juice fasting, and what are the reasons that one might want to experience any of those types of fasting?
Oh my goodness, that's a lot. That's a lot, my friend.
Okay, then let's
start. I'll try.
Yeah, 5 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I mean, so here we extended fast, right? We have people go on just water, and it's medically supervised, and we make sure that there are no pre-existing conditions that would preclude someone's water fasting. So, we would unwind them off of medications that would be problematic. And that could be a really amazing recuperative experience and regenerative experience. Our bodies, we call it catabolizing. They catabolize or break themselves down and tear down old decrepit tissue, and they build them back up fresh. And so we can see people rebuild brand new immune systems, essentially, after this profound degradation and then rebuilding. So we see that happen to a much greater extent from an extended fast. Whereas an intermittent fast, or let's say someone's fasting anywhere from just skipping breakfast to a complete abstinence of food for a day or two, that is still fantastic and has other benefits. We'll see things like improved insulin sensitivity, and that's just one example. But that basically just means we're pushing people further away from becoming pre-diabetic or diabetic, type 2 diabetic. And so even if we don't lose weight, by the way, we still see these increases in hormones. One is called adiponectin, and that helps us become not insulin resistant. And so that's something that's great. There's a whole lot of other benefits too. We see reductions in inflammation, inflammatory markers lower, and so wonderful things for people who are healthy, people who are overweight, people who have conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. We see fast mimicking diets, basically, a modified fast for a 4 or 5 day period done every once a month or once every 3 months or 6 months or whatever it might be in patients with multiple sclerosis. So lots of different ways of improving our own health, and lots of different versions of it, which is great because we all have different preferences. Like if you love breakfast, I'm not going to rip your breakfast out, but then there are other people who just don't want to eat breakfast, and they've been told over and over again that they have to. It's the most important meal of the day.
What is up with that? I mean, people make it such a big deal, like if they don't eat breakfast, they're going to drop dead. Because it was hammered into their head because I don't think it's the most important meal of the day. I've never eaten breakfast. Even when I was 200 pounds, I never ate breakfast. I still don't eat breakfast. I'm doing IF without even knowing that I was doing it because I don't eat breakfast.
Isn't that cool when that happens, when you're like ahead of the science in this way? You just follow your own body, you follow your own intuition, and it just so happens that it's been steering you in a good direction. I think that's amazing.
But so many people don't. So many people subscribe to these plans where they're forced to eat 3 or 6 structured meals at designated times, whether they're hungry or not, and weigh and measure their food. I mean, that's the exact opposite of what we're taught at True North. Do you see that in your clients as something that's useful?
Yeah, no, I work with a lot of patients who have come from Food Addicts Anonymous, and I'm familiar with their program.
Absolutely. Strict weighing and measure. 4 ounces of protein, 6 ounces of like starch, and 7 ounces of non-starchy vegetables, but you gotta have that tablespoon of oil. I mean, these people are eating less food in the whole day than I eat in a meal, in terms of volume and weight. It's I don't know how they're not starving to death.
Yeah. I mean, they're following a prescription, and like you're saying, I think what it does is and by the way, I think for some people, I think it does work. It helps them get out of the gates, and it helps them take control over their appetite and their hunger and their health. I do see a lot of people, so I do see a place for it, but on the other hand, I also see it as showing us that we can't really trust our own cues. And I'm guilty of this, by the way. I'm totally guilty of this. I've used things like a tool called heart rate, or a biometric called heart rate variability. Basically tells you how variable are your heart rates, are your heartbeats. Do they go boom, 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 or they go boom, 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 boom? How do they work? And I've used that to tell me if I'm ready to train, if I feel ready to train or not. Now, other people, let's say I work with a lot of dancers, for example, who just intuitively feel that they have energy that day and they want to go train. But for me, I use this device to tell me that I have energy or I don't have energy. And it's kind of funny, right? The same way they're using these measurements to tell them that they're hungry or they're not hungry. And in some elite cases, elite level athletes, maybe they need to dial it into that specific number. Or if you're just trying to learn to reconnect with yourself and get a sense of what, I guess what I'm saying is, I think that those are tools that can be used to help get someone kind of in the direction that you're already in now, to help them understand what a reasonable portion might look like. But hopefully we don't use it as a crutch to get in the way of our connecting with ourselves.
Right. What I don't understand, and maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't, because I know that you aren't the typical dietitian hospital, at a hospital where you're prescribing, a certain component diet with a certain amount of macronutrients and micronutrients and protein and carbs and things like that, and fat and calories. But on these weighing measuring programs, everybody gets the same amount. They don't take into account how much a person exercises, how tall they are, how much they weigh. And that's what I don't understand, because don't we all have different caloric needs based on these factors, like our age, our sex, how tall we are, whether or not we exercise? How can we all eat the exact same amount of food every day at the same? I don't get it. And I've offered these people to be interviewed. They don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you'll see exercise programs fit the same mold. You'll see all of this as a way to try to mass produce something for everybody, and it's not tailored to the individual. And so to see this as a guideline, but then to change that to suit our needs. There are certain people who do better, squatting in a different way than other people do. Some people will put the bar high, or they'll put the bar low on their back. Some people will do better. They'll recover faster and they can do more training volume. Same thing with food. Some people have a lesser appetite. Some people have a greater appetite. I think to understand that at the end of the day, we're all shooting for the same thing. We're basically saying eat more plants. Yeah, and whether it is cathartic to put that into someone else's hands and have that person tell you what to do so that you don't actually have to steer the ship at first, which I'm fine with that happening at first. At some point, it's really nice for people to feel empowered and to feel, hey, I trust myself now. And I work with a lot of patients who have eating disorders,
right.
And I totally get they don't trust themselves just yet. And so it's kind of I hate the word journey. It sounds so cheesy. But, in the beginning, maybe they put their health in someone else's hands. And then if that person doesn't abuse that trust, they say, hey, look, at some point, I, as a health professional, need to be obsolete. You need to be the person who's empowered. And so I teach you what it is that I know. And so that's, I think that's, like you said, a lot of people feel funny about coming on and talking about those things. Because I think you kind of have to feel comfortable with your own business. Hey, if I teach other people to not need me, are they going to still refer people to me? And if I'm doing what I should be doing, if I'm doing what, they will be sending people to me. But otherwise, I think it comes from, are you coming from a place of surplus or insufficiency? And I think that can really affect people's counseling styles.
Well, that's the thing, because I've never questioned the efficacy of the weighing and measuring program. They work, but you have to do it the rest of your life. And what I never understood is I understand that there are certain things that should be weighed and measured. If you're going to eat toxic animal products or toxic oils or very high fat foods. But to make somebody eat only 7 ounces of vegetables per meal, I mean, at True North, every meal we're eating probably triple that. And I think it discourages people from eating large volumes of the most nutrient-dense, calorie dilute food, which is what is going to help them not have cravings and lose weight. And that's the biggest problem I have, is that the vegetables, the non-starchy vegetables, are so limited.
And I would actually add to that, and I would say I see absolutely, bless you, I would see absolutely no need to measure not just the raw vegetables, the cooked vegetables. I think I also throw legumes in there too. I really do. I think depending on the person, and some people need to slow cook this more than other people do, but I have not seen a single person's health get worse. I mean, with the exception of like end-stage renal disease. Sure. But really from adding more beans and greens into their diet. And I know that beans get a bad rap sometimes because they have 600 calories a pound. And oh my goodness, like that means we're all going to get fat because we're going to eat, an average American eating 5.5 pounds of food in a day. People will say, well, 600 calories a pound for beans times 5.5. Oh my goodness, that's like well over 3,000 calories. But no one eats 5.5 pounds of beans in a day. So to have to portion control that for a typical person just seems absolutely crazy to me. And it is really liberating. It feels really good when you can eat large quantities of the foods that you know serve you.
And at True North, where you work and where I've had the pleasure of guest chefing several times, every meal is ad libitum, and they've had, I believe Dr. Goldhammer said, over 30,000 patients in 32 years eating this way that you and I recommend, and no one's gained weight. And everybody that's needed to lose weight has lost weight, not weighing and measuring. So I'm glad we're on the same team there.
Yeah, we totally are. I will just throw out that I have seen people overdo things like fruit, for example.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen people overdo that. I've seen triglycerides go up real high. I've also seen people follow a generally starch and fructose-based diet. I mean, mostly starch-based. But I've seen people do that and not continue to lose weight. I've seen people kind of plateau. They're at a healthy weight, but they still personally want to get down to whatever their own goal is. Maybe they want to have their waist circumference be a certain amount, or they want to have abs or whatever it is. So I think that this can deliver amazing health to people, and small tweaks like we're talking about here, like I was saying, adding additional legumes to the diet and maybe crowding out just a small amount of those, of whatever it might be. If it's people eating lots of bananas, I'll see people go crazy on bananas sometimes. There's a bananiac or someone on the internet on YouTube or something who eats like 10 or 15 or I don't even know a day. So there are certain versions of this I think that can help deliver, that very last 5 or 10% of what people want. But you just follow this way of eating and we see you get healthy. It's just a question of whether you get that last few inches off or not, and then we can adjust.
Yeah, I agree with you on fruit, because I think especially, myself as a recovering food addict, specifically sugar addict, fruit is so delicious that when you get a ripe banana, it's really easy to eat 5 or 10, even, I've never ate 10, but I've eaten 5. Whereas, with sweet potatoes or beans or vegetables, the satiety is just so great. And you don't really overdo those foods like you do the fruit. Not that food isn't healthy, but it is much easier, I think, to overeat on it.
Yeah, it makes you feel full for right now, but what about a few hours later?
No, it doesn't. It's too much water. It doesn't keep you full like potatoes, rice, and beans.
Exactly. I talk with a lot of patients about how beans hook you up a meal in advance. We talk about the second meal effect, where they basically control blood sugar, not just at that meal, but the next one too. And if you eat them at dinner, they hook you up the next morning too. And there's great research on this. And so we kind of have to look at the body across a 24-hour period, not just what's the calorie density of that food right now. Yes, that matters, but also what does it do a few hours later? So yeah, I think we're on the same page. Big surprise.
For people that absolutely cannot eat legumes, there are certain people with certain GI intolerances or even allergies. Is there maybe a second best food?
So are we ruling out all legumes, like lentils and peas and beans?
I have a client that was born with an anaphylactic allergy to all of them, like literally EpiPen if somebody gives her, that, and I've seen it. So is there, and she is trying to lose weight. She has lost some, but is there a second best food for health and weight loss?
I mean, I think vegetables come in a very close second. I mean, maybe vegetables are even better. I mean, I'd say vegetables are probably for weight loss. But I was saying in terms of health, I've seen research looking at, I think the study was titled something like legumes are the best predictor of dietary survival in older adults of different ethnicities or something like that. And I would say that vegetables are another. I mean, you could definitely be very, very, very healthy without even eating them. I mean, I think you'd do better with them, but in this type of condition, we would definitely just have them load up on their non-starchy vegetables, on raw or cooked. We'd have them go with their potatoes. We have the satiety index of even a white potato. A white potato is super, super high, so she can definitely, actually more filling white potato calorie for calorie than any other food. So
absolutely, I agree with that. Do you get that question a lot at True North when you lecture or from clients? Because so many people, especially the women I work with, were conditioned that not to eat potatoes, not to eat rice, that carbs are bad. Maybe they'll eat beans because they don't seem to think that beans are carbs. They seem to think that beans are protein. How do you get people over their fear, their carbophobia?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think there's a bunch of pieces to this puzzle. I think one is that you mentioned white potatoes, for example, white potatoes being bad, and if we, depending on the way that we look at the research, we'll come up with different conclusions. So, white potatoes are the foods that Americans are consuming more than any other vegetable. More vegetables are consumed as white potatoes than anything else in this country. And if you look at this associative data, you would see, well, hey, look, the more potatoes people eat, the less healthy they become. But they're not eating them as baked potatoes. Nope. They are eating them as fries.
Right, or chips.
Potato chips, exactly.
With oil, salt, and sugar.
Right, exactly.
The three things that are not anywhere present where you work.
Right, exactly. And so I think people can get confused from that. They'll also say, hey, wait a second, potatoes have a really high glycemic index. That means they cause blood sugar to spike, insulin spikes, and oh my goodness, that means I'm going to get fat. I think it's really important to note that when insulin spikes, that makes you feel really full. There's another great study looking at soup. I forgot the exact title of it, but it's something like soup increases satiety and delays gastric emptying, despite being hyperinsulinemic. Basically, they're saying that soup is such a wonderful thing to eat. It makes you feel really full.
Absolutely.
And part of the way it does that is by spiking your insulin. So potatoes spiking insulin, I don't see as a problem. Actually, that's one of the problems with things like agave nectar and fruit juice, is that the fructose does not spike insulin to the same extent that glucose does, which is what potatoes break down into. And so it doesn't really make us feel full. It bypasses this hormone called leptin. It needs to go up to make us feel full. And so I have no problem with that. Some people are carbophobic. I say, what is it that we're really afraid of here? Is it spiking blood sugar? Is it spiking insulin? Are we concerned? Because it doesn't make sense to have chronically spiked insulin, but that won't happen if we eat this way. That's why we see people even going on that rice diet, that Kempner rice diet. They're just eating
white rice.
White rice, and my goodness, that is not healthy. And sometimes they'll even add table sugar to it. And we still see better glycemic control. So the carbophobia...
And weight loss. My brother did the Duke University diet, the rice diet. And it's like one of the only 2 times he lost weight, of that and the Ornish program. But he never could sustain either, unfortunately.
Yeah, they can be tough. The compliance, I think having a good support system is really big. And that's one of the things that you do that I think is a very high value to people.
Go ahead. I was just back to the potato. People say, well, if I eat potatoes, it turns to sugar. Like everything turns to sugar, right? Isn't that the whole point, to get the glucose to your brain and everywhere else in your body?
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem. I don't think certain things will turn into sugar more readily than others, but I don't think that the sugar is a problem. I'll see a lot of patients with diabetes come in, and really, True North is amazing with this, by the way. I didn't actually think that I would see it to the same extent that I do. We have something like a 70% carbohydrate diet here. And I would say, just anecdotally, that on average, I don't know, I would be willing to bet that our diabetic patients or patients with any kind of insulin, exogenous insulin that they're taking, I'd say that they rip out about 1/3 to 1/2 of their insulin dosage pretty immediately when they follow this diet. And yes, they're getting a lot of carbohydrates, but another important thing to note is something called an advanced glycation end product. It is basically a fancy term for sugar binding to other stuff like DNA or whatever it might be. And that those AGEs we don't find in this diet in any real level, in any important quantity, and those desensitize us to insulin. They make it so that we become more diabetic. We take people off of the AGE-laden diet. So basically, there's more than just carbohydrates. I think we tend to oversimplify things. We say carbs are the enemy, and Atkins seems to have popularized that or whatever, but it's a little too simplistic. And there's great research also, something called the Insulin Index of Foods, published in, I think, 1999, basically showing that beef has about the same insulin response as white sugar does. It's
wow.
The higher protein foods, they go through what's called gluconeogenesis, the process through which we turn some protein into sugar, and that can also have an insulin effect. So I'm not really worried about the carbs for people who are trying. I think it's a great thing to have in your toolkit.
It's just hard when they come from the standard American diet and going to the standard American doctor, because anywhere they would go in Santa Rosa, whether it's True North Health or the McDougall program, they're going to get well, they're going to reverse their disease and lose weight. But to convince them of this, it can be difficult, because their doctor told them, don't eat potatoes, don't eat white rice, don't eat any kind of potatoes or rice, eat protein and vegetables. That's what they're told.
It'll take some time, I think, for the old school folks, no matter what field, if they're physicians, if they're nutritionists, if they're exercise scientists, it doesn't really matter. It's going to take people some time. I think we get kind of caught up in dogma, and we feel threatened when there's new information out there that challenges what we had once believed. And I think it's great. I used to be on the paleo, before it was called the paleo diet. I followed that. I went on a low carb. I was ketogenic, and I take a lot of pride in flipping my perspective based off of the science that I read. Some people, my father included, but he said, if you change your ideas on this, how do I know that what you're doing, how do I know that what you're saying is accurate? You're just going to change your ideas whenever you learn something new. And I think, yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Wow,
I wouldn't trust someone who just gets stuck in a rut and doesn't adapt based off of the new things that they learn. So,
how did you feel on the paleo diet as opposed to how you feel now, or look like? Were you ever even overweight? I mean, you look great. I mean,
thank you. You know that I was obese.
I know, but the people don't have to know that, because they yes, I know that, but it's like
Sorry. Yeah, I definitely was. I was obese. I was absolutely obese, and I've tried, like I said, as many diets as you can possibly imagine. And sorry for saying that.
That's all right. We're not going to bother editing it, but that's okay. I know, it's all right.
I remember I had a leaky gut. And I remember reading that if I was to eat grass-fed meat, and this is while I was actually in school at this time. I was in graduate school, and I went to the farmer's market because I learned that at least what I was told, if I had grass-fed butter, and if I had bone broth, and I had all these grub-fed chicken, that it would improve my health. It would reduce my markers of inflammation. So my homocysteine levels, as an example, my homocysteine is just one example. It's a marker of inflammation, and it should be very, very low. It should be as close to zero as possible. And mine was all the way up in the 20s, which is really, really high, way out of range. And when I went on this way of eating, it dropped by about 2 points, which was nowhere near enough. And I made a whole bunch of changes, and since joining this crew, it's down as close to zero as you can possibly be. It's less than 1, and it's been measuring that way now for years. So, and the leaky gut has resolved as well. So I hope that other people take that into consideration and do the same thing. That oftentimes we'll see a lot of this kind of dogmatic approach without it being actually backed by science. So
which way of eating, the paleo diet or the True North diet style, did you find more delicious and satisfying?
I honestly, I love this way of eating. I absolutely love it. I love that I can eat unlimited quantities. I know that on the paleo diet you can too. I actually did that because I thought that for athletic endeavors, that was what I needed to do. I thought that I needed the protein. I love breaking that down and actually talking about how much protein is truly required for athletic purposes. And so, for what it's worth, my athletic performance hasn't changed in either regard. It's improved, I should say, under both. So it's not like I perform worse that way, but I perform just as well doing this. I feel fantastic. I really do. But I won't lie to you. I don't personally feel the effects of diet that much. The only things that I personally felt, a lot of people, like, they'll eat, they'll go raw and they'll feel something totally change in their body, or they'll pull gluten out and I don't ever feel any difference when I do any of these things. The only things that I really experienced a change from is exercise and intermittent fasting. those two things.
Interesting.
But I'm thrilled to see my blood labs come back every time now, and they kill what it was 10 years ago. So I'm not changing anytime soon.
You have a lovely wife and 2 little kids, and they eat this way, right? Because people always say, "Oh, well, I can't get my spouse to change, and I certainly can't raise my kids this way." All kids need, macaroni and cheese, right? I mean, that's just it's written somewhere.
Yeah, in the Bible,
or
the child.
Sugar, yeah.
Yeah, no, my wonderful wife and 2 delicious little kids, a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they have been eating this way ever since they were born.
Wow.
They are not deficient in anything. They are riding along those growth curves right where they should be.
And they like the food, right? I mean, I see you guys eat in True North. I mean, oh my God, do I see you guys eat? I mean, your family is like half the food that's in the dining room, basically.
Yeah, they love it. They love it. They don't know anything else. This is what they've been eating. And a lot of people will say, well, what are you going to do when they go to school? And what are you going to do when they go to the real world of whatever it might be? And look, all I can do is educate them. All I can do is give them the information. I would be really upset with myself if I were to feed, like you said, macaroni and cheese. And if my kids were to come down with type 1 diabetes, and we know that we have an increased risk of developing type 1 diabetes when little kids are having dairy.
Sure.
I would be really... I don't think I could lift myself, honestly, especially because I know this. If I didn't know it, I get it. If I didn't know it and they developed it, fine, there's nothing I could do. But I do know this, and I feel a big responsibility having brought these kids into the world. And my wife is super supportive. I mean, she's amazing with this stuff. And so the kids are doing wonderfully. I remember reading as well recently that most 10-year-olds have developed fatty streaks on their arteries, basically the beginnings of coronary artery disease or atherosclerosis. And oh man, my kids, no way. I mean, if they want to try that other stuff, they can, but informed decisions. I want them to make informed decisions. If they choose to do it, that's fine, but I just want them to know what it is that they're doing, and then they can do whatever they want. I'm not going to keep this stuff in our house. We're not going to buy it with our money, but when they go to their friend's house, if they want to do that, I feel like that's the only way to really do it without having a big pushback effect.
Yeah, and I hear that from parents. So yeah, but you're raising them right, and they might actually end up, preferring the food that you give them because that's all they have.
Yeah, I think so too. I would love to see their faces. Like if they were to actually ever eat McDonald's ever, I just want to see like the gross look on their face. Like, oh my God, I just could never do that. I just want to see what that looks like. Sometimes, actually, our 2-year-old will go to the park and someone else will be eating goldfish. And actually, I tell Lily, it was Lily, to not say this. Well, she'll go, that's not food. And I say, no, Lily, don't say that. You're going to not make friends that way.
That's so funny. We got another Gar Goldhammer in the making.
Oh my goodness.
Don't make me laugh. Excuse me. So is there a typical True North patient that you see? I mean, they obviously have some kind of lifestyle related problem. Many times they're overweight and have things like heart disease, diabetes. And so when they come to you and you're counseling them on nutrition or exercise, there seems to be, I guess what I'm saying, is it easier for you to get them to eat right or to exercise or both? Because when I looked at some statistics recently, it said something like only 6% of the women in the United States exercise. That's really bad. I don't know if that's true. That was the last time I checked. But I guess what I'm saying is it easier for you to help somebody change in the direction of optimum health with the diet or to motivate them to exercise? Because I know for me, the diet was the easiest part because it's delicious and I love to eat, whereas the exercise was it took me a long time to make that a habit, or to even do it. I mean, I had to have Doug Lyle just hit me over the head a million times.
Did he flog you? And he does that. I heard he flogs
pretty
you.
much. I mean, because he explained it to me from so many different angles. Because I was already slender by the time I started exercising. I didn't use it to lose weight, but he made such a great case for it, especially with me, somebody that has a lot of anxiety, and so I'm a big fan of it. But I'm telling you, for me, it was harder to embrace that than it was to embrace vegetables. So I'm wondering what your experience is working with people.
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, I think it depends on where I'm working. So this is the first place that I've ever worked where the food seems to be the easier part to tackle. When I worked in strength and conditioning, everyone loved to exercise. These are athletes. These are, college athletes and, like I said, pro athletes too. And so the exercise, they know that if they don't do that, they're not going to perform. The food part, it was kind of harder to twist their arm to do that. So, I think here the food part is way easier to do. I also think with the exercise stuff, I think a lot of people think of it like you have to go to a gym. You have to go to a gym. If you don't go to a gym, you're not going to get strong or healthy. I think you can do things that don't even require a gym. You look at these blue zones, the places in the world where people live the longest, and they do exercise, but it's not formal. They'll carry kids, and they'll have baskets that they're walking, they'll garden, they'll do a lot of physical things. They'll play, maybe they'll play soccer or whatever it might be. So I think exercise can be something that's fun. So if it's something that's not sticking for you or for any patient I work with, I would start and I'd say, what do you enjoy doing? Do you like roller skating? Do you like dancing? Do you like playing basketball? And then I would have that be the gateway. The same way I do the same thing with diet. It's not like I try to get people to go whole food plant-based who have no interest in doing it. I just say, hey, what's your favorite vegetable? Like, what did you have any vegetable that you love?
Yeah, artichoke. I love it. Even, I've always loved artichokes.
You like artichoke, yeah. So that's something I would start with that, and I'd say, how can we get artichokes into your diet? And even if it's not a perfect artichoke, even if it's cooked in stuff that it shouldn't be in, if you're following a standard American diet, getting vegetables in, even if it's slathered in the wrong kind of stuff, let's get a foot in the door. And I do the same thing with exercise. I do the same thing with diet. A lot of people, when they leave here, they're really inspired. They say, I'm going to stick to this 100%. And then there are some people too who say, hey, look, it's great. It's a little too much for me to take on right now. So we try to baby step them, and we do what we can. And so that's why I'm saying, even though here the food part is easier, they're clearly motivated to come here. Most people don't come to True North for the exercise. They come for the fasting and the food. Oh, hang on.
Sure.
Hey, buddy, can I catch you later? I'm just right in the middle of an interview. But it looks gorgeous. Thank you so much. No problem.
That's okay.
That's Augie.
Oh, I love Augie. And Augie does not follow this diet. one of the few employees that doesn't. I don't think he'll watch this, but he's a doll. But imagine if he only followed this diet.
Oh my goodness, he would be the best cleaning gentleman he would be taking the whole place down in half the time. So I guess I was just saying that the exercise is harder to get people to follow. I actually just finished a lecture just now on how and why and how to resistance train. And I was trying to explain that we used to think that just you walk for an hour a day and that's enough. That's all you need for exercise. We used to think cardiovascular training was everything. That's it. And I made, in my opinion, a compelling case for why there are lots of other benefits for resistance training as well. And again, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. I actually, even though I'm in a gym right now, I like, it's going to sound weird, I like climbing trees. I like it. I like going to the jungle gym and playing outside. I like doing the monkey bars. I like doing handstands. I like doing stuff like that. For me, it's fun. So I think as long as it's fun, you're going to stick to it. Same thing with the food. If you like the way you're cooking, if you made that pecan, sorry, I'm a New Yorker, so I say pecan. If you made pecan pie for everyone, no one would need omnivorous desserts.
That's the one thing. I'm a recovering pastry chef, and when I was the executive pastry chef at a Los Angeles restaurant, it wasn't even vegan, but I still didn't use sugar or flour or oil or salt. But I knew what I was doing, and people ate it because it was delicious, not because it was, True North food. It was good.
Right. Yeah. Oh, good is an understatement. Yeah. And so that's. I think it works like that with everything. You just get a foot in the door. Don't worry about being perfect, right? Just start with something. And one of the things that I do here is I work on the case reports that we publish. I also work on the testimonials. We call them True North Navigators. And it's amazing. I'm just finishing up one right now about a guy who, again, just got his foot in the door. He was a really overweight trucker. And, he just started, he's reading, I think it was Joel Furman's book, and he just started to get his feet wet. And before you know it, it snowballs. So I think oftentimes we'll set the bar real high. We'll say, hey, I got to exercise. If I'm going to do it, I got to do it big. I got to go an hour a day, 5 days a week. Or if I'm going to eat this way, I have to do it 100%. For some people that works, and for some people it doesn't. So I like either way. I think it's fun to work with patients.
It's just interesting that the two of the things that will help people the most in gaining their health and losing weight, if that's their goal, is to exercise and eat more vegetables. And it seems like it's the two hardest things to get people to do.
Yeah.
But I like that idea because I have a tendency to, be more Goldhammer than Lyle. And it's like, well, just do it and do it perfect and all. And not that I am perfect, because for 52 years, clearly I was obese and I wasn't. But with exercise, I think especially, because I, recently had a big bout of asthma and I couldn't spin for like 3 weeks. And when you have to get back, it's much easier to exercise consistently because when you take a break, it's so much harder to go back to. So I remember that first day back on the bike, obviously I didn't want to go because I had already now created a new habit of not going. And I remember I said to myself, okay, I'm just going to go to the gym. I'm just going to go to the parking lot. If I don't feel like it, I'll go home. But by the time I was in the parking lot, I was like, okay, I'm going to go in. And then I'm going to get on the bike. I'm going to get on the bike for 5 minutes. And that's it. But then once you're all dressed and you drive there and you're on the bike and the music's playing, and like, see, 75 minutes.
Leave at a point. Yeah, but you just lower the barriers.
Right. In my head, I make these little, I do lower the bar for myself when I, if I don't feel like I can eat a whole pound of vegetables, well, I can eat one leaf, and by the time you start a good habit, it's like, well, I may as well just keep going.
So you do this with yourself. You do this with food to this day.
Well, for food, I don't do that. But with a client that says, "Oh, I absolutely can't eat vegetables," and it's like you can't eat like one cherry tomato. Are you telling me you literally will die? So for them, I do baby step it. But it's just that I guess I know what the result will be in your health and your weight when you go all the way. And it's just like I just want people to just do it because I know they'll feel good. But you do have to start somewhere. You're right.
Exactly. Going back to the legumes for a second, people say, "Hey, does that mean I have to eat a whole cup of legumes if I tell them it's really good?" You have to eat. They say, "I could get so gassy. I would lose all my friends if I did that." And I say, "No. I say you start with a tablespoon." I show them data that 2 tablespoons of beans a day reduces risk of death.
And that's all you need, because you know what? I think because I have problems with legumes, and I retested it after a year, and it happened. But maybe I ate too many. Maybe I should try your thing about 2 tablespoons.
You could even start with less, and just like you said,
like one bean, literally.
Yeah, start with a bean, and again, if you have an actual anaphylactic,
I don't. But I have like just what they're calling an intolerance, and I just.
Yeah, so if there's like a legitimate medical, I mean, I would differentiate here, and I would say, depending on what's being tested, if these are immunoglobulins or whatever it may be, but just like we're saying, to start out real small and to know that even a small amount is good, and could for a regular person who's having no problem with the beans, would one chickpea really mess you up?
I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then maybe day 2, do chickpeas and just see. And maybe there's a dose at which I cannot tolerate, but maybe there's a dose at which I will.
And that concept is called progressive overload. And it works in the gym, and it works in health. It works just all we just have a little bit more. And you do this with the beans, and I would pick one that you're not having an intolerance, that you don't show intolerance to if there are any. Mm-hmm. I would do that. And then, your gut flora has a chance to adapt. The bacteria in your intestinal tract, they adapt and they improve, and so you baby step. And the same thing, like we need to help you out with the exercise stuff. AJ, I got your back.
I know. I wish if you could pay someone to exercise for you but still get the benefits.
Oh, I would take that. I would do that. I would do that for you.
I would do that.
We can connect our blood somehow. Like we'll just get a big, really long IV, I guess, something that goes from LA to, I guess, Santa Rosa.
Yeah.
I would do that for you. You have my word.
I would totally pay someone for that. But I do love yoga. The rest of the stuff, and I like walking my dog. Like you say, make it fun. That's fun. Taking a walk is fun. Taking a hike,
But then what we would do with that too, because you know how you walk your dog and it's fun, but your dog sometimes wants to sprint, right?
Yeah.
Right? So when your dog sprints, you just follow your dog. Like you go to the park and whatever the dog does, you do. So the dog is...
Well, wait, whatever the dog does, so even when the dog lifts her leg, I'm not going
to... I was going to say that if the dog pees on a hydrant, you follow suit. It'll be a little strange. But I'll bail you out.
That's just what I need. So...
But yeah... Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I mean, we can talk.
The same way I look at my kids, I see them playing too, and they do these things that are just naturally really good for themselves. Like I'll see my daughter will chase a butterfly as fast as she can, and then she gets bored from the butterfly and she sits and plays with mud, and so she's basically going from a sprint to really, active recovery, and then a sprint, and this is interval training. This is what we know is so effective at doing so many wonderful things for the body that we can just follow your dog or my daughter, and I think we end up having it be a fun process rather than just oh man, I hate the gym.
Right. Well, I once heard that the best exercise is the one you'll actually do. Would you sort of agree with that? So
absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
The best vegetable is the one you'll actually eat. So
exactly. just even if there's stuff that I don't like I have a vendetta against treadmills. I'll tell you honestly, I don't like treadmills. I don't like treadmills because they use a lot of hip flexion. They require your hip to, you have to lift your leg, but then the conveyor belt pushes your leg back. You don't have to extend your leg. You just have to keep flexing and flexing and flexing. And I really can't stand the treadmill. I think it's a posture destroyer. But if that's what people will do, if that's, I see a lot of people with treadmill desks over at Facebook headquarters. When I was there, I saw they were bringing in some treadmill desks. And even though it's like, oh my goodness, it just biomechanically bothers me, I'll take it. If that's what it's going to be, I'll take it. Any kind of movement, just like you said.
Right. Was it fun working at Facebook? I mean, it sounds like it was.
It was cool. I'd love to. I wish I could sneak you in there sometime. It is a pretty cool place. And one of the chefs is one of the head chefs is vegan, actually.
That's amazing.
he's a good guy, and he makes a lot of really, really delicious stuff. He's the guy I looked up
Hook me
to.
up. I'll interview him. That sounds amazing to be
Okay.
able to that
Cool.
sounds incredible. Where do you
Yeah.
stand on alcohol? Now I know it's not served at True North, and Dr. Goldhammer would say, it's not acceptable in any amount. It's a drug, not a food. Where do you think about? Because I found, and this isn't a judgment on the social aspect or whatever, but I found, at least with the clients I work with that are trying to lose weight, especially women, I find it's just a diet destroyer.
Yeah. I mean, just like you're saying, it makes it really hard to lose weight. To be totally honest with you, you will find people who are lean and drink plenty of alcohol. You will find that. I think that when you take someone who is overweight or obese, or even who's normal weight, and you try to have them lose weight, alcohol's get in the way. I mean, I forget, what is it, like 7 calories a pound or something? 7 calories per gram.
216 per ounce. So
I mean, it's calorically dense, and our body will preferentially burn that over everything else, so it puts everything else on the back burner and getting to that. But more important than that is the behavioral side of it, as far as I see. So it's really, and I'm guilty of this. I don't drink anymore. I once upon a time did, but I'll see, my own decision making process goes all south when I had drank alcohol. I mean, I'm telling you, I would just make really bad food choices. So I feel like that ends up being a harder problem than the actual number of calories that are in the food. So yeah, it's definitely not something that I would encourage. I know that there's a lot of conflicting data looking at alcohol for health. I think that when you really, really look at it closely, it's not quite so baffling. But from a weight loss perspective, I think it's not really a great thing to incorporate. And I would kind of agree with where you're going with that.
It's not figure friendly.
No, definitely not.
So in this concept of baby stepping, we started out talking a little bit about intermittent fasting. I'm not sure we explained fully what it is, but how would you baby step somebody? So let's say somebody's coming to you, let's say their health is okay, they're not diabetic, they don't have heart disease, maybe just some high cholesterol or something. Would you say right away do intermittent fasting, or would you just say, hey, how do you transition people?
Yeah, I always address what they're eating. I think it's always easier to fast. As weird as that sounds, I think it's easier to fast or to even juice cleanse than it is to feed. So I always focus on the food, on what people are eating first. And once that is dialed in really, really, really well, then I'm totally cool with using intermittent fasting as a vehicle for you mentioned, was it asthma that you said you had?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's pretty cool research looking at alternate day fasting for as little as 2 weeks, improving asthmatic symptoms. And so I see really great things that are possible with intermittent fasting, but I think that the benefit that we'll get from actually changing our diet comes first. So I will always get the diet in place. Once the diet looks really, really good, then I'm thrilled to add in intermittent fasting. I'm also thrilled to add an exercise or mild cold stress. These are lots of things. We have lots of tools available to us to further our fat loss, to further our, bolster our longevity or whatever it might be, reduce inflammation. So, and the way that I'll usually do that, even though my favorite type of intermittent fasting to complete, and you said, to define it a little bit more, it can be as little as skipping a meal, or it can be skipping a whole day of food, or you could complete what's called a modified fast, which would be something like having about a quarter of your energy needs on your fasting day. So, 300 to 500 calories of food, let's say. It's just eating lunch. But I personally happen to like alternate day fasting. I feel really, really good when I eat essentially every other day. I do know that this is the hardest way. People have a really low compliance rate with it, and I do not recommend it to most people for that reason. But what I do see is very, very easy for people to do if they do want to practice intermittent fasting in some way, is just to skip a meal. So if they're really busy, let's say that they get to work and they just work through lunch because they forget, they're so excited about what they're doing, they're so passionate or whatever it is, or they're just so busy, then just skip that meal. Don't force yourself to eat. Don't eat in your car. Like, eat when you get back home. Eat when you're with your friends and your family and you can actually enjoy the meal. A lot of people do great skipping breakfast. So I would say one of the easiest ways to do this is just to eat from, say, 11 to 7 or noon to 8 or whatever it might be. They're great benefits. What's that? You do that?
I'm about a 6 to 8 hour window. 11 to 7 is the most, but I'd love to be able to stop at 5. But with having a husband, if I want to eat with him, I have to go over that. But, I didn't know I was doing intermittent fasting because when I started exercising, the class was 11 o'clock and I couldn't eat before I exercised, so hence intermittent fasting. But you told me that since I'm drinking like broth in the morning, that I'm technically not intermittent fasting. I didn't know. I drink the warm broth from the
I'm
vegetables.
happy to find it. Yeah, when you look at what's called time restricted feeding, they'll technically call it, they'll say if you're having any non-water beverage, and this is more for research purposes, this is so that they can have a clear definition. Coffee they'll count as a non-water beverage. You've technically broken your fast, but and same thing with tea or same thing with broth. For what it's worth, metabolically, you're going to be getting the same benefits from your broth as you would if you were having water in the context of an intermittent fast. So I'm thrilled that you're doing that. And it makes sense, by the way, that you wouldn't want to eat a lot of food and then go and exercise.
Talk about that, David, because so many people think that if they don't eat before they exercise, they're going to pass out. But I personally, even if it's a gentle yoga class, if there's anything in my stomach, I get sick. I can't have food in me and then go exercise. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would think, so food is hydrating. So one of the things to tease apart here is that we do want to be hydrated going into exercise. So if we're not
I have a water bottle with, I hibiscus tea actually, unsweetened. But yeah, I always have fluids.
Cool. So as long as we're hydrated, we're going to be good to go. I can't think of any animal in the wild that would hunt or exercise after having fed. I would bet that I could parade my cute little 1-year-old right in front of a lion if it had just fed. And it would not have any interest in my.
I don't think Karen would let you do that though. Just so you know. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
I was now I have to figure out something else to do on the rest of my Wednesday.
Yeah.
Go to the zoo, I guess, and do that. No. So yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. You are hungry. That is what drives you to go and get food. And so yeah, I think what you're doing is fantastic. You're eating, fairly a few hours after you exercise.
No, actually, almost immediately. When I get off a spin bike, I'm starving, and my food is in the car. I do a 75 to 90-minute class, and I'm super hungry. And I have my vegetables already steamed, and they're in this thing that keeps them hot. And I would say about 15 minutes afterwards, on spin days, I eat right away. And then that's still 11 o'clock.
Spinning at some point? I'm so curious to see what you would look like in your spin class, like bumping to the music.
I love standing. I prefer to stand because the knee doctor said you can sit, you can stand, you can't do both. So I'm doing the whole class standing. I don't know if that's right, but
it's picture fun. You doing like wearing leg warmers and neon.
Absolutely, just like Jane Fonda, That's funny.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's great. You're paying attention to your appetite, and I think that's great. I'll also just throw out that exercise has been shown to have a kind of an appetite suppressive quality to it as well in the short term. So, when you exercise, we're dumping out our carbohydrates out of the muscle and out of the liver, and we're using our fat as well. And so our body oftentimes kind of confuse that between did it come from our muscle, did it come from something we ate? So sometimes people will think that they have to eat right after they exercise, and for you feel really hungry, and that's cool. Definitely go and do that. But also, if you don't feel really hungry after you exercise, you can also wait. It'll take a little while for your sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, to kind of back off. And now so anyway, I think that's another area that people feel pressured to do things. And that's one of the ways that, protein powder supplements and these manufacturers can promote their product is if you have a 30-minute window after you finish training and that's it. And if you're going to lose all of the progress, you have to have, no one's going to eat, it's hard to eat a real meal within like a few minutes after you finish training.
Sure.
But if we know that we actually have a greater amount of time, we have more flexibility, we can eat real food like the 87 pounds of vegetables that you like to eat.
Right. Well, no, it's not 87, it's about 4, but I'm actually just eating that. It's not like I go right away to my carbs, but I just feel like I need something afterwards, even if, I don't know. Now, I heard, though, that if you eat before exercise, you don't burn fat. Is that true? That's why it's also better, if that's your goal, is to burn the fat?
Yes, you're not burning. There's something called mass action, and that basically means you're going to burn what you eat. So if I've been fasted, but let's say I take a spoonful of oil, I'm going to basically shift into metabolism of that oil. I'm going to use my respiratory quotient. The amount of fat that I burn is going to move towards that oil. I'm going to burn that oil. If I were to take a tablespoon of sugar, it would go up. My respiratory quotient would go up, and I'd burn sugar instead. So you essentially end up burning a bit more of whatever it is that you're eating. It's not to say that you're not burning fat. I wouldn't look at it quite in that dire disparity. I would say you can definitely eat if you want to eat before you exercise. If it helps you exercise better.
Sure, exactly. It should be the see, this is the thing I find. People don't listen to their own. They listen to someone else as to when they should be hungry. If it helps you to eat before you exercise, if that's what's going to be make you exercise. But don't do it because so and so said you have to do it. If you're not hungry, don't eat. No one could ever have become overweight if they didn't eat when they weren't hungry. you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. It really is interesting, and also to know that there are different situations require different things. You know that if you're about to run a marathon, then maybe it makes sense to have eaten a few hours earlier. But if you're just doing this recreationally, just to feel healthy, to feel good, then are we really gonna recommend things to you based off of some study that some athlete did who's trying to put on as much muscle as they could? I think it's important to tease this apart and look at what is the individual need. So, can I catch you later? In the middle of the interview now. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
You're so popular. People ask me all the time, how many calories do you eat? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, should we, people use these little tools. I think it's called chronometer or chronometer obsessively. I mean, who cares, right? I mean, if you're eating the right food. I mean, I plugged mine in recently because people wouldn't stop asking me, and it was about 1,800 calories, and I'm 5'6" and 117. But is this something people should be worried about? How many calories they're eating, or should they be worried about the quality of the food they're eating?
Yeah, eat the food. Eat the food. Focus on the food itself. Those numbers are stressful, I think. I've done the same thing. I've spent years entering things into MyFitnessPal, and I also don't know if it's chronometer or chronometer. I don't know, but I've done this too, and it kind of rips the joy out of a meal when you have to you sit down and you're about to have something and you have to measure it and weigh it out and enter these things, and it just rips the joy out of it. So yeah, like I said before, as a tool, totally cool to figure things out, like you said, to understand. If you're plateauing, you don't know why you're plateauing. I've seen actually my best friend, he's used this and he's absolutely loved it. It showed him he didn't realize how many calories were in things that he had. So as a learning tool, as something to do for a day or a week or whatever it is,
not the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. This is the kind of thing. And that said, the National Weight Control Registry, this is a group of people who have lost a lot of weight and kept it off.
Right.
One of the common factors, in addition to weighing themselves regularly, which I think can also be kind of a stressful thing.
I don't believe in that either. I think
but these people weigh themselves off, and it's one of the things that seems to correlate with their success. The same thing with portion control and calorie counting, they do this too. So it can be kind of confusing, it can be kind of confounding, but the thing is, they're not implementing the same dietary approach that we are.
That's the other thing. That's the thing about the weighing and measuring programs, is they're not implementing the True North diet, because if you did the weighing and measuring program on a True North diet, you'd starve. 17 ounces of food a meal, really, right? I mean, I think so. It's certainly not enough food for me, but that's so interesting. Well, we're almost out of time, but what I wanted to do is thank you for something you said to me, and then this actually will lead into the last question. Other than, somebody like Dr. McDougall or Dr. Goldham or Dr. Lyle or Dr. Esselstyn, you're the first person in the plant-based world that's a health professional that told me that I am not going to drop dead because I haven't eaten nuts in 5 years. And you explained about the ALA and because I literally eat minimum of 4 pounds of non-starchy vegetables every day, and that doesn't count the vegetables that may be included in a recipe or salad. And you said that I don't have to worry about it, so thank you. If I do drop dead, I will blame you. I'm just for the record. But because people write me and they're like, well, if I don't eat tahini dressing, I'm not going to absorb the greens and my micronutrient. And I'm like, you're 50 pounds overweight, and maybe that would be something you don't want to do for a little bit, is eating these high-fat dressings and things like that. So just because there's so much, just like the white potatoes, there's so much misinformation about, nuts, and that we have to eat them, and that we're going to basically drop dead if we don't.
Yeah, no, you're going to live forever. You're going to outlive me, I'm pretty sure. And just like you said, I think we look at these foods for their isolated nutrient. People say, well, where do you get your protein? And even in this camp, people will say, well, where do you get your fat? So it's really hard if you're eating that many vegetables, it's really, really, and especially if a lot of them are green leafy vegetables, we're going to get a whole lot of omega-3s. ALA, or alpha-linolenic acid, is an essential, it's an omega-3 fatty acid, and then that can convert into another one called EPA, and the EPA can convert to DHA. And I may be getting this wrong, but something like a cup of Brussels sprouts has about 20% of your daily requirement of ALA. And green leafy vegetables, dark greens, are going to have tons of this stuff. So if you're eating the quantity that you're eating, you're going to be good. I'm not worried about it. Yes, if people are really concerned and they want to have a multivitamin. Oh, not a multivitamin.
I wish I did this thing because I wanted to show you, because it would be great if it could show me the amount of ALA and stuff I was getting. This was just a free app, But
what did it say?
It said that yesterday I ate 1,797 calories. Yesterday was a spin day. Total fat was 12%, 7.9 grams. Saturated fat 1.1. I don't eat any oil. Sodium 638 milligrams. I don't add any salt. Potassium was in the 10,000s, 313%. Total carbs, 408.9 grams. Dietary fiber, 71 grams.
Whoa.
Protein, 47.3 grams. And this is just from eating, potatoes, rice, vegetables, and a little fruit.
Wait, I'm curious. Tell me what the percentage of calories, did you just say what the percentage of calories from fat is? I'm curious.
It said 12% was fat. And I didn't even eat any seeds yesterday.
So that's crazy, right? Think about this. I think people will talk about, where do you get your fat from? 12%. And there are a lot of people in this community who will say that they're able to get their percentage of calories from fat down well below 10%. That's really hard to do. I don't even know.
I didn't even eat the high fat grain yesterday, like oats. This was just with a little bit of brown rice, and I still was able to get 12%. So you're going to develop
a fatty acid deficiency. You're going to make plenty of EPA and DHA, and you're going to upregulate those pathways through which you convert ALA to EPA and to DHA. So I'm not at all worried at all. I think that's really cool. What was the percentage of calories from protein? I'm just curious.
Let's see. So it said my protein was 47.3 grams. Oh gosh, there's like this black line because I guess I don't pay for the program. So I don't know what the percentage was. 40.
You're going to do great. I'm not worried. I mean, the 40, that's plenty. You're not going to be suffering any deficiency condition, I can imagine. I mean, I think you're going to do absolutely wonderfully. What I was saying before is that people really are looking for like kind of a multivitamin for the omega-3s. Take a tablespoon of ground flaxseed.
What I've been doing now is I've been creating new salad dressing recipes and using chia seeds because then I can get the benefit of the chia seeds but get a nice thickener into this dressing. And
that's a wonderful way to do it. 1 tablespoon ground flax, and chia is comparable to flaxseed as far as omega-3s. Over 100% of what you need in a day.
Absolutely.
So
would you say that 1 tablespoon of either a day is enough, or?
Yeah, and if they're eating the way that you eat, I don't even think that they need to do that. I think that yes, 1 tablespoon of either is plenty. I think there are lots of other benefits. I care more about the lignans in the ground flaxseed than I do about their omega-3s. There are other really wonderful benefits to these other foods. Those lignans are anti-cancer and really wonderful health benefits to them too. So yeah, I think we're so concerned about are we getting enough? And we're getting enough without even trying if we're eating basically the way that you're eating and the way that we eat here. And so we're not.
By the way, the way I eat is the way that you teach people to eat at True North. It's not like I made this up. I learned it from Dr. Goldhammer, and
Cool.
So. It's funny because I'll teach sometimes at places that aren't plant-based. I'll go to spas or cruises, and there'll be people that'll come to my class, weight loss class, and they'll be overweight, and they'll say, well, I can't eat any carbs, but yet they're overweight, and yet I'm eating over 400 carbs a day. So how is that even possible? It must be magic, huh?
You have a
magical
egg that you're depositing those carbohydrates into. Yeah. It's awesome. AJ, first of all, can I thank you and tell you I look up to you a whole lot, and I think your energy is absolutely.
Your energy is we're New York Jews, man. I mean, we resonate. You're just
dancing. We're dancing.
Yeah.
You're absolutely fantastic. I admire you. I look up to you. You're a friend, and I just thank you so much for chatting with me. I will do this with you anytime you want.
So, if somebody wants to get in touch with you at True North for a private consult, what's the best way?
I would have them call the front desk. It's 707-586-5555. So I'll say it again, 707-586-5555. And they can schedule an appointment. That's our front desk staff. Or I think they can also email, I want to say it's office@truenorthhealth.com. I would like to say that is the way that they can do it too. But doing it that way will be a great way to get in touch.
So what is next on the horizon for David Goldman?
Ooh, I don't even know if I can talk about this. I will be very cryptic, okay?
Okay, all right.
But I will tell you that I am currently, the thing that I'm exquisitely excited about is I am supporting a film. I'm working as a scientific consultant for a film.
Very cool.
That will be a very well-known film, I would say. I'm very excited about it. Really, one of the 2 biggest directors in the world is producing this film. And we're looking at basically plant-based diets and athletes and seeing.
Well, those are your 2 passions, the plant-based diet.
It's the combination of crossroads. I dream about this. I couldn't ask. I'm so excited about this. This movie is probably going to air at the beginning of next year.
Neat.
And I cannot wait. I'm working with great athletes. We're basically seeing that professional, high-level, elite athletes can perform beautifully, athletically, when they're on a plant-based diet. It doesn't feminize guys. We can still be strong and powerful and capable. So hopefully kind of in seeing that image and hoping that it will shift at some point. That's the thing that I'm most excited about right now.
That is so cool, because I think if there's going to be a global shift, it's going to come from the men, because, they do look at the plant-based diet as like you say, kind of feminine, that real men don't eat these plants. And then you meet people like David Carter, the 300-pound vegan, and you're like, okay, maybe they can and do, so.
Yeah. He's actually involved in this endeavor in some ways. We're in touch with him. Yeah, he just like you're saying, it's very, very possible. And then for us to shift that paradigm, to see that we can be strong and we can be capable. We're not going to be some hippie, long-haired, pale guy with no muscle whatsoever. That's actually my favorite. Those are my favorite people to work with.
Right.
Those who say, hey, look, I want to represent this way of eating. I want to embody it and show it visibly. And that's one of the things that inspires me to train too. So that's the thing. That's really exciting to work on.
I am vegan. I am strong. All right. Well, I know you got to get back to work, and I actually have a broadcast myself to do right now. So great talking to you, and I'll get this to you as soon as possible so you can put it on the True North Facebook page or send it out if you like. If you are David Goldman and approve this.
I totally do. AJ, thank you so much. You were an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, David. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, David.